looked at, well, who am I, and what things did I experience in life. It's a group of three. They tell stories to each other. And then I asked them, is there something that connects us three in our life stories? And then there comes a kind of a click, and then they see something in the stories that connects them. Now that is, you might call emergence. It's unplanned. You can only ask for it or look for it, and what it will be, you don't know. That was kind of an introduction exercise for them to look at their own lives, but also to build a relationship with the others in the group. Build a mind map. And from two perspectives, so I split up the group in two halves. One group did it from a learner perspective and the other one from a teacher perspective. They build a mind map, and then what you do is you switch to groups. And so first they build it from their own perspective, or the teacher or learner perspective, and then you switch to groups. This is kind of an offer that the learners are making to the teachers. This is how I would like to learn in the future. Now, what do you as a teacher, how do you want to add on to this and make it richer, but also make it more balanced? So it's a learner-teacher experience. And then the final stage is where you say, look, it doesn't matter where you start, but based on where you start, you get a different picture. Now, the whole truth is in, the connection between the two. So we did that as a final stage, blend more or less those two pictures together. This is your complete truth about teaching and learning. And then I made the connection back to the life story and said, look, if this is teacher and learning in the future, based on our insight on how the brain works and some of the ideas we have on creativity, then what do you want to change in your professional life? And then I identify a few aspects, and I invite them to translate that to their profession. Now let's have a look at how creativity works as kind of a process, in which you engage or facilitate. And there are a few things about a creative process that I think are worth mentioning. Any process has somewhere a starting point. Then there's a moment of divergence where you say, look, we'll look for multiple options, we'll look for different ideas. Then there's a process of convergence where you bring things together, you synthesize, or you merge things. And then there's an end point where you say, okay, this is all we could do for the moment, let's finalize here, this is the end result. Now, between the starting point and the end point, there's also some other aspect which is called emergence. So that's kind of a higher order that rises above the ideas that you have gathered so far, and even in the synthesis, there's a higher order above that. So it's what I did in the introduction exercise with the group, where I say, what are your skills and capabilities? What are your life stories? But what is maybe a thread that connects all of you? You might call that a higher order. If you don't ask for it, you won't find it. So it's a lot about reflection, looking back and seeing beyond what is there. So I try to, with a few exercises, give them an idea what emergence is and how you might evoke it in a group. What kind of questions do you ask? How do you structure a process towards that? I think that was more or less the ending of day one. Day two is where we said, okay, let's simply do an exercise. So we abandon a little bit the process. A process is often filled with techniques. Now let's take one technique and just try a little bit how it works. So I went back to process and said, look, we're going to run a process and we're going to do it on one of the topics that are relevant to you. So give me some key questions you have in your career based on what we saw yesterday, and that you would like to address in a creative way. And then we reflected back on that and said, ask me what kind of questions do you have, where I made certain decisions. And the interesting thing was about the process, you make kind of decisions as you go. The techniques provide you kind of a way of moving forward. But if you really invite the group to contribute in their own way, the techniques need to be customized in the moment. And often when you develop your intuition, you're right, but sometimes you do make little side steps that are not working. And it was funny to see that I made 2 side steps that didn't work. So I corrected them in the process, and I think it was nice for them to see that it's all right to make side steps that don't work, and you just pick them back up and you move further. So I think that to a certain extent also encouraged them to be a little bit more risky when they had to facilitate their own processes the next day. But they were, I think, probably quite confident in just trying the techniques in different ways and structuring the process as they followed along. And I believe that was one of the highs of the whole workshop, that although not everything worked, they tried to make it work together. Not only in getting the results out as an answer to the question, but also in looking at the processes, seeing how things can work differently, and where different facilitation styles make different choices. So I think in that sense there was a rich experience. The invitation was then to come up with 3 cases. 3 cases of the workplace where you say, I want to do something in terms of a creative emerging process there, and how am I going to structure it? How am I going to facilitate it?
I think what I would do is perhaps give them a calendar and get them to think who they think they need to meet. So they might have that.
So we had 3 cases, and they were presented within a minute. Case number 3 was clear, not too much complexity, something you could focus on, and Case number 2 was kind of a day thing, a daily workshop, or something with a little bit more complexity, more stakeholders, more issues playing. Case number 1 was very complex, was a 2-year process with all kinds of stakeholders and etc. And I was fascinated that the group just chose the 2 most complex cases to work on. Would I hire them if they would present this to me? So in the feedback session I asked them, so are you confident with what you presented? And they were kind of, we had little time, and all these kind of reasons that, look, this is a real life situation. You come into an organization, there's this huge monster of a complex problem, and they ask you, help me. So what are you going to do? You make an analysis of the whole thing. That's important. So the client feels that you understand them. And then you zoom in and you say, look, what I can do for you now today is this little piece. And you flesh it out in a way that you can convince him that you are creative and that you can do things in a different way, and they reach a certain result. At that point they started to understand that you need to make choices. It's not you come in and you do everything. No, there's this play between how much complexity do I allow into the area that I'm going to work in, and try to be creative. And I think that was kind of refreshing for them to see that, to see how do you make decisions, how do you deal with complexity when you're a facilitator. So yeah, I think they definitely learned from that as well, from that experience.